Hello, my name is Nancy and I am the Normal Intuitive. I run one-question.net. On Facebook, I run one question at a time, that's one spelled out. And on Instagram, you can find me over at the number one question at a time. This is my second ever episode, so thanks for joining me. If I haven't had the pleasure of chatting with you before, I am the Normal Intuitive. I am a 30-something stay-at-home mom. I've been married 11 years. I have rescue dogs and cats. I live a pretty ordinary life despite the fact that I am, in fact, a psychic medium. And I started these podcasts to, one, go along with my blog over on one-question.net, and also to help start kind of dispelling the myths of intuitiveness, being psychic, being a psychic medium. I think there's a lot of misinformation, and I think there's a pretty big stereotype on a psychic and what you would expect a psychic to be or not to be. Not quoting Shakespeare, but it was there. And so this podcast is going to be kind of dispelling the myths and chatting about what it's like to be pretty normal despite the fact having these abilities. And today I actually had a subject in mind, but something has kind of happened this morning, and I really think I'm going to be speaking off the cuff, so forgive me, I have no notes, but I really think it was kind of important to chat about, and I think you'll all hopefully be able to kind of relate to what I'm going to address today, and that is the topic of energy and how someone's energy can affect you. Now, I'm sure if you're listening, you probably have some kind of empathetic ability where you're feeling what someone else is feeling. And as a mom, you can relate to that because, as soon as your child is born, or even when your child's in the womb, you're still feeling them. You're feeling their energy. And as a mom, instinctually we're programmed, or a dad even, we're instinctually programmed to take care of our children's needs and take care, comfort them and support them emotionally, spiritually, physically. And so my kids, I have 3 kids, 2 of them are living, and my 2 living children, I have a son that's 4 and a daughter that just turned 9, and they spent a few days with grandma, and I went to go pick them up yesterday, and they had been away for a couple of days, maybe about 3 or 4 days, and I went to pick them up, and we got to have lunch with grandma, and everything was wonderful, and then we came home, and it seemed like as soon as we came home, it was like a switch was turned off. Or turned on, I should say, with my 9-year-old. And I like to joke that she's 9 going on 19, or she's 9 going on teenager, because all of a sudden she just kind of erupted into all of this emotion and anger and just real, like, almost hatred, borderline, for everything was wrong, and she was angry at us, and I wasn't really sure why. Only that I hope that maybe after she got a good night's sleep, I thought, well, maybe she, she hadn't been getting a lot of sleep at grandma's. Maybe she'll feel better in the morning. We're all kind of going to get used to being adjusted to, getting back on schedule. But unfortunately this morning, very similar, where she just kind of erupted into these fits of anger. And my 4-year-old seemed a little on edge himself. Now, I know part of this is due to just getting back on the schedule of being at home, and today Dad's home as well. It's Good Friday, it's Passover, so there's that. But there was just this level of her, of just towards me in particular, of just this disconcernment and just, real borderline hatred. And I'm really not sure where it was coming from, only that I'd asked her, to put away her clothes from grandma's and put her dirty clothes in the washing machine, all normal expectations. But this anger and this energy was just thrown at me, and I could feel it, and it just kind of stuck to me like spilled maple syrup on a counter, just this energy was just so sticky, and I could feel it. And even now as I'm chatting, I'm still feeling it now. And unfortunately for me, I have 2 readings today, 2-hour-long readings. And so I need to get this energy off of me. I need to protect myself from this energy. And I also need to make sure I'm in a good space so I can read these 2 wonderful women I'm going to be reading today. And I am sure, though, that all of you can probably relate to when, someone is just in a bad mood and you can feel it before you see them. I mean, you can, as soon as they round a corner and they're in your space, all of a sudden you just feel like this, if not doom, just this heaviness in the air. And it's hard as an empathetic person because you want to help that person so much. And as a mom, I really wanted to help my daughter and my son this morning. I wanted to really kind of get to the bottom of what was going on, but she definitely was not going to let me into whatever was going on. She was just angry and she just let it all spill out, and she became very mean to me. She was speaking back. She was saying some very cruel things, and I finally just said, you know what? I can't do this with you right now. I can't. And I ended up having to walk away. And I felt bad, but at that point, it's at the point when someone is throwing that kind of energy at you, whether it's your child or your spouse or your friend, at some point you have to just walk away. And even if it's hard, because it's your child, you have to walk away from it, because that person is not going to stop throwing energy at you. And when someone's doing that, they know what they're doing. They know that they are purposely doing that. I mean, it's a very conscious thing to throw that kind of anger and that energy at someone. When someone is throwing such negative energy, that's a very conscious decision on their part. And I mean, think about it from their point of view. Think about if you've ever gotten super angry, maybe at your spouse or your friend, and you, or maybe your parents when you were a teenager, and you just had that anger, and it was just so, you let it build in you, and then you just throw it out. And it's almost like Godzilla. If you ever watch those old Godzilla movies with like the fire coming out, I mean, that's really what it is. And it's a very conscious decision. When Godzilla was trying to kill Mothra or whatever, Godzilla was very consciously like throwing that fire out. And Godzilla was very consciously like banging things around. It wasn't like Godzilla didn't know what they were doing, or he was doing, or she was doing, whatever Godzilla was. They are really consciously doing it. People are just the same. And yes, I understand Godzilla isn't real, but people do the same thing. That kind of energy, it's never on accident to throw that kind of negative energy. It's never on accident. And don't let people tell you otherwise. When they throw that kind of negative energy, that's very much on purpose. And they very know what they're doing, even if they're 9 years old. Even your 6-year-old, when they start yelling at you, they know. Maybe they don't have much control over it at 6 or 9 years old, because that's, our brains are still learning and growing and wiring. They may not have, the ability, and that's our job to teach them. But they still very consciously know that they are saying some mean stuff to you. And that is when you need to remove yourself from them. And unfortunately, some of these people we cannot get away from. They are our children. They are our spouse. They are our parents. They are people that we love and care for. But for whatever reason, they could be the most wonderful people in the world, but for whatever reason, right at that moment, they just need to, Godzilla fire on you as far as this negativity. So what can you do about it? So I'm going to say some granola stuff right now, and this is very not me to be very granola, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I've learned from the late Sylvia Browne. So the late Sylvia Browne, she was a psychic, and that was also one of those psychics where she had received it from her grandmother and so on and so forth. But she talked about this negativity being thrown at us, and she said that there were tools of protection for us. So one of the tools for protection that you can do, and what she talked about, and you can even look this at Google this, it's legit, is you can surround yourself with a tube of mirrors and face it outwards. So you could ask God. For me, I call God, I call them Asna, which is the feminine, and Om, which is the masculine, but it's just God. You say, God, please surround me with a tube of mirrors that faces outwards. And that's going, when you think about mirrors that are facing outwards, if someone that is throwing that energy at you, if they look themselves in the mirror, what's it going to do? It's going to come right back to them. And it's going to kind of, it's like that old saying, whatever you say to me is going to stick back on you like glue or something. It's very similar, but you can surround yourself with a tube of mirrors and that faces outwards. You can ask yourself to be surrounded by light, and you can ask yourself to be protected from negativity. If you're in the moment and someone is throwing stuff at you, you can simply walk away. If you can't get away, don't respond. Ruth Bader Ginsburg has said that nothing is ever accomplished by yelling. And it's very hard for someone to fight when the person isn't yelling back or not responding. You need two to tango, as they say. And when someone is yelling, if you don't yell back, they are going to run out of energy. So let's say you're in the car with your kids, and your daughter is having, or son is having a really, really bad day, and they just start exploding and start yelling. Well, you can pull the car over and you can wait for them to just get it out, because they obviously need to get all of this emotion out. But don't respond to it. Don't engage in that kind of negativity, because that's only going to fuel their fire to continue doing it. And I know this from being a mom for the last 9 years, that it doesn't help if I yell back. And in fact, it always makes it worse. But today, I didn't feel like yelling back at all. It just made me feel really sad for my daughter to know that she was feeling all of this pent-up aggression and energy. And she felt, on one hand, it was good that she felt safe enough to release that. But on the other hand, that whatever she had pent up was being thrown at me, and it just made me feel so sad for her, that she felt like she couldn't get that out any other way. And right now, her and her brother are off with their dad, which is why I'm able to do a podcast right now. But at some point, I will talk to her when she's calm and she's out of that space. I can talk to her about that, about what really is going on. Why did you feel like yelling? What were you anxious about something? Were you worried about something? And this you can do with your spouse. You can do with your parents. After the fact, you can't do it right away. Because if when they're yelling at you, you can't be like, well, what are you concerned about? I mean, there's no reasoning with someone that's screaming and yelling. But later on, if this is the relationship that you want to keep intact, and this is a relationship that is very dear to you, as my daughter is to me, I will definitely sit with her and ask her what's going on and try and sort through those emotions. Because if this is a relationship that you're preserving, you want to help them and figure out what is going on so we can alleviate their pain. Because if they're saying such things to you, imagine the kind of pain that they are in. If this is someone like your boss who you can't, you're not going to have a heart-to-heart with, you can also think about it from that standpoint of, if someone is saying such horrible things and throwing such negativity at you, imagine what kind of pain and hurt and anxiety they are going through, that they feel like they have to turn that around. I remember there was a woman in our lives a couple of years ago, and she would just say horrible, vile things. And I remember the lesson that I took away from the way she acted was, what is going on in her life to cause her to be such a way? And I really feel for that. And that's the empathetic person in me, that I'm going to turn around and go, wow, they must be in so much pain. Now, not everyone that is going to yell and scream am I going to want to help. But if you can help them, if you think you can, there's no harm in trying. Again, if it's a relationship that matters to you. However, if it's, a cashier, or if it's someone on the street, like we were in New York yesterday, and there were plenty of unkind people, that I'm not going to stop and say, well, you just said something rude to me about my children, but please tell me about your life. That's not exactly the position or space I was in. But this is also a tool that you can use with your family, with your friends, and with someone like your boss or someone in authority. Just look at them from the angle of, I am so sorry that they feel this way. I am so sorry that they feel like they have to act this way. And what kind of life have they led that they feel like this is how they can treat people? And it really does stem in childhood. And there's no pressure on moms or dads, right? It all falls on us. But it really is, we are really responsible for teaching our children that behavior like this is I tell my daughter, well, this isn't going to win you any friends. This isn't, people are not going to want to be around people that are constantly throwing that kind of energy